Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 23rd episode of The Lab. As always, sitting with me is Brandon Wierig, Alex Schroeder, and I'm Lou Follenkamp. We hope you guys enjoyed our discussion last week about in-season weightlifting. We hope you guys are going to take more consideration into planning, your training throughout the year. But what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is we were going to talk a little bit about programming. In particular, I wanted to go a little bit more into, I know we kind of discussed programming a little bit in one of our earlier episodes. I wanted to go a little bit more into what is known as linear progressions as opposed to a wave progression. So what I wanted to kind of bring up to is what are they both, and then maybe a little bit of the pros and cons between the two of them, and maybe what athletes you might use these for. So to kind of start it off, let's talk a little bit about linear progression to linear periodization first. I'll let you two take it away on that, and then I want to weigh in more on the wave progressions.
Okay.
It's very straightforward. You have like your three basic focuses: a hypertrophy phase, strength phase, and then a power phase. You can I break my hypertrophy phases up into like two. Yeah, you can say three waves. I don't know. It's all kind of phases. I have a 1x20, kind of like a reset, or for new lifters. Kind of you got 20 reps to get a feel for the movement, or just fill that body with some blood. Then I have an eccentric phase, and then I have a metabolic phase, which I kind of use either like drop sets or even some clusters. Strength phase, just basic 6 reps or less. Trying to move heavy weight. Couple different ways, like board presses, floor presses, pin squats at certain angles, block pulls, just anything to kind of overload the nervous system. Yep. And then power work phase, where you just drop the load to a certain percentage and then maybe use accommodated resistance and just try to move that bar as fast as possible.
Yep. So in the non-strength and conditioning world, what that would sound like is you basically start off at the very bottom and you're kind of progressively increasing the demand of your body, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, just think about it like if you have an empty barbell on week 1, the following week you're going to add 5 pounds. Mm-hmm. Once you complete that, the following week you're going to add another 5 pounds, and you're just going to continue to keep going up until you run into a wall.
The hypertrophy block is just trying to increase size and trying to just increase as much it's called cross-sectional area of the muscle. In theory, the bigger that cross-sectional area is, the more muscle fibers you can recruit. So as you use the hypertrophy phase to increase that cross-sectional area, then you go to your strength phase. Once your body gets kind of used to the weight and the overload of the weight on your nervous system, it'll make that strength phase a little easier.
Okay. We could even dive. We'll finish linear first, and we can go into more of the rep ranges and sets, things of that wonderful nature. So who would you go about using a linear progression for? What types of athletes, maybe even sports or age?
I start our young kids on a hypertrophy phase right out of the gate.
Yeah. I would say younger kids or kids that, in terms of being in a weight room setting, being younger.
Yeah.
Like a newer lifter and stuff along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, if I know somebody's got a whole year off season, I might. Probably old me would do that. I would probably go almost through a whole basic linear style progression. I don't think I would do it as much now. But yeah, if I would do it for an older advanced athlete, it'd be if I know that his, say, track season ends this outdoor, then he doesn't have anything until next outdoor.
Yeah.
And the year after would be, I would kind of use more of maybe a linear style progression with some different modifications and things like that. But
what's the longest you've ever gone with a linear progression? What's the longest phases you've used? Maybe even the shortest.
My hypertrophy phases are 8 weeks. My strength phases are 9 weeks, and then I have 9 to 12 weeks of power.
Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a lot more time within those phases.
Yeah.
About 6 months.
Yeah.
About 6 months.
Give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then, in terms of like, besides like you said, you use it a lot for the little kids. Why in particular is that necessarily your go-to for the younger athletes?
I like the higher reps for coordination, and then once you give them a heavy load, they just freak out.
Yeah,
like the body, just the nervous system isn't ready for it. The kid's mentally not ready for it.
They haven't put enough mind to muscle connection on knowing when this muscle breaks down. They have to fire this one harder in order to overcorrect it, in order to get through that sticking point. I mean, you see it a lot. Like kids they'll be doing the lift, and then like they hit like a slightest wall, and then all of a sudden they're just collapsing. And I mean, it's just like the risk of injury is higher when they don't know how to grind yet, or they don't know how to fire certain muscles and have that connection.
Well, you put a 5 or 10% increase on the bar, it's like goes to shit quick.
Yeah,
like you go from hitting something smooth for 3 or 4 to like that's like you got pinned.
Yep.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yep.
So the jumps is it's a little easier when you maybe decrease the reps or increase the reps by 2.
Yeah.
Versus, you go from a 3 or 4 rep warm up and you start getting down to your doubles and singles.
Their muscles just fatigue quicker.
Yeah.
They're just not used to it, just like anything else.
So it sounds like you get a lot more exposure throughout those longer types of phases.
And it's a hell of a lot easier to watch a kid. You can start realizing where his weaknesses are through being tired at rep 8, 9, and 10 versus at maybe a 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
Versus a 1 or 2 rep at something heavy.
Yeah. Okay. What would you say would be some of the cons of using a linear progression or a linear periodization?
Boring.
Yeah, it's long. It's say something pops up, then you're in a hypertrophy or strength phase, and you need to produce power, and you're not ready to produce power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're trying to ask the body to do something that it's not ready for.
Yeah. And like when Brandon says that, it means as if like you're not at 100% level of power. Yeah. You're still sitting at a 90, 92.5, 95%, but just that little 5% of a boost just isn't there.
Like if I had AJ on a linear, knowing that he's before he signed his contract and he's getting ready to go play in the CFL again, if I would have done him with a linear progression and the Browns would have called him back and he had to go run a 40. And he's used to doing all this high volume, and he runs a 4.6 or a 4.7 versus a 4.4, which that might not seem like a big difference, but that is a huge difference.
Yeah.
And the difference between a multi-million-dollar contract.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So definitely, especially with professional athletes, linear, you could...
Yeah, especially as a free agent, you have to be ready to go at any moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes during those phases of AJ's career that you've experienced more than what I have.
Because there was a summer we were trying to peak every week.
Yeah,
he had 4 different calls throughout the summer between the Saints, the Packers, the Chiefs, and then end up finishing with the Browns. So there was no time to.
You had to be on top of that.
Yeah.
You couldn't really risk of. Let's try this because if it doesn't work, then we might have potentially just fucked your career.
Yeah. Or the hey, I saw this on Instagram and TikTok. This looks like it'll work.
Yeah.
And then try it. You're experimenting with a potential 7-figure salary.
Yeah.
You just don't want to do that.
Luckily, we had 6 or 7 months of just spending every day together through combine training, to where we could kind of figure out how his body works and what doesn't work, and we went from there.
So if you guys had to summarize in one big pro, one big con for linear, what would you guys say? What's the best pro? What's the best con? Or the worst con, I should say.
Best pro, I would say that it is easily trackable. It doesn't take a genius to just add 5 to 10 pounds to a barbell. It depends on the type of person as well. There's a lot of people that need that structured programming.
And it can be very complex, or very simple. Movements don't have to be complex. You start getting into the power outputs, depending if you're an Olympic lifter or something like that. You don't have to worry about accommodated resistance. It's very
Yeah. And then in my experience, I've always found that linear, inevitably, you hit plateaus in one aspect of your training, whether that be a speed output, a power output, or like a hypertrophy output. Like something's going to go up and down. So I would personally say that would be the con of linear. But how we kind of do it is the kids will go until they hit that plateau, and then we'll move them into the pendulum waves of the 3-week waves and stuff like that, because they've reached that level of advancement, if you will.
They've progressed to that level.
Yeah.
But now you think they could handle it.
Yeah.
So that's actually a great segue. So then let's go a little bit more. You just said the pendulum or like the wave programming. Give us a little bit more background on that, Trotter.
Yeah, so this is coming from the West Side method or the conjugate method, which stems from the Russians and the Soviets from way back when. They found that when they did a 3-week wave, then they could continually be able to recover and continue to train at a higher intensity, like week in and week out. So that's where that went. They've tried a 4-week wave. Some people respond good to a 2-week. I have noticed that. I've experienced that with myself a little bit too. So that's where that goes. But essentially, you just want to, if we're talking about squat, you're going to start on week 1, 50% bar weight plus 25% of accommodating resistance, whether that be chains or bands, and that is added together at the top. So if you have just for simplicity, 1,000-pound squat, the bar weight's going to be 500. Your band tension is going to be 250 at lockout at the top, and then that's roughly estimated around 10% in the bottom. And then on week 2, you would jump that bar weight to 55%. Same accommodating resistance. Week 3, you would jump it to 60%. You would reduce the reps. In terms of, you go from a 12x2, a 12x2, and then you would go to a 10x2 on week 3. So if you were to add up all the volume on week 1 and week 3 would be identical. Your main volume would be on week 2, where you would end up doing more weight than the other weeks. I feel like I kind of lost people on that because I lost it a little in my head.
You were a little Rain Man. It's okay. No, I liked it. So in terms of let's say focusing on a specific attribute, one of the things that I've kind of liked about the 3-week waves that I've kind of started to utilize is, let's say I could, for example, focusing on either speed strength or speed endurance. I've been able to kind of either monitor or change based off what I've needed to do in the gym. Basically having those 3-week opportunities. So if I know okay, I sucked at this week with where my weaknesses were not found with those lifts, I can modify in those next 3 weeks immediately and be able to address those. And then I could go back in the next 3 weeks and try one of those movements from before and see if what I just worked on in those 3 weeks was enough time and enough basically of an addressing to that weakness to make that then progress. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've liked, especially since seeing all the different variations or watching how I can find where are my testers and where are my weaknesses at, I've been able to make more adjustments quicker and having, I don't want to say faster results, but smarter results, if that makes sense. Because it's not I'm accelerating my training progress. If more than anything, I'm being able to address my weaknesses and then I'm not having to go through, like you were saying, that 9-12 weeks, and then I can finally make those adjustments. So that is kind of a nice thing about the wave progressions over the linear. But like you guys were already saying before, having that with a younger athlete, they're going to be developing as it is. Mm-hmm. And so with the 3-week waves, I think you can definitely take, like you were saying, like what you do with AJ already, you're able to make those adjustments as you need to, even on the fly if you need to. What would you say, you two, would be some of the pros, your number 1 or 2 pros for using the wave or pendulum programming, and then we'll talk about some cons as well.
Well, I think it's easier just to put everything in one program. You can have your heavy days, maybe like the West Side method where you do your heavy waves early in the week, do your power
72 hours later.
Yeah, and later in the week, and then you can have your accessories or more like a hypertrophy where you're doing your 100, 150, 200, whatever reps it is of band and work and whatever. And then I think it's easier just to do everything at once.
Yeah, essentially it's just all laid into one. Try to think about it in terms of the wave progression or the conjugate method also has, if you break it down in terms of like how we think about it in a year setting, that we are putting linear progression in that as well. So every we'll just say 8 to 12 weeks, usually the kids will end up taking a max. At that point, then they earn their new percentages based off of that max. So if you want to look at it like that, they're essentially doing a linear periodization only with 3-week increments in there at that point. And it's all just based off of just like breaking it down into like mesocycles or like, smaller training blocks, if you will, like 2 to 6 weeks. And then hit them with a retest. Or if we don't feel as if like the intensity is there, or they had to take a couple weeks off during that mesocycle, extend it a little bit to that 8 to 12 weeks. But yeah, it's kind of just hitting all aspects of the linears, like what Brandon was saying. Is like you have your power output, you have your strength phases, and you have your hypertrophy all in the same day.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually, was going to be, could you combine the two?
Yeah.
And when would you combine the two?
It's all scenario based.
Yeah.
Give me a scenario. I'm curious now.
Well, if I, like right now I'm in more of a, still kind of pushing the strength power with some track athletes. I mean, state is until May. So we still have, I'd like to get through maybe teeter into March, where we might start making some of those transitions to a power speed or a power strength, where I'll go, depending on how they come in. Like right now, a lot of them come in 3 days a week, so we'll do 2 strength days of power day. Then we'll start transitioning to 2 power days and then maybe a strength day. And then when they get a little closer, it'll just be all power, and I'll just have them come in twice a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what's fun about this is that it's like, if you think, like, let's think powerlifting. Like if you break down powerlifting, it's force. Like if you force is
force times mass equals acceleration.
Yeah, and then if you for a bar, but it's the same principle. You're trying to get mass and you're trying to accelerate it fast.
Yeah.
You just don't have to think of it as a bar weight. So you come in with these different, like we did these impulse kettlebell swings with AJ.
Yep.
How fast can you redirect that kettlebell swing in a certain amount of time? The principle is the same.
Mm-hmm.
You're just using different it's not all about straight bar work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is cool because you kind of start thinking about like the different athletes and different planes and stuff, how they play in.
Physics? Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's in there.
Stay in school, kids.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I had transitioned the basketball player, Abby. So she doesn't need to be in a super, low angled in her hips to knee during basketball. Usually she's just going to sit right there around that 90-degree angle. Mm-hmm. So that's where we would box squat her at the whole time. She added probably 35 to 40 pounds on her back squat during basketball season. And so like now as we're transitioning into track, we lower that box to simulate more of her in the blocks because she's just slow out of the hole, which is understandable. So if she's slow out of the hole, if you think about that in terms of being in blocks, she's going to be slow out of her blocks. So we're trying to strengthen her in a more compromised position, I guess. Like she did essentially elevated kettlebell jumps the other day in a sumo stance to like work her hips and her glutes more as well as her quads. And now she's standing on 12-inch boxes, going down until the kettlebell touches the ground with her torso upright, and then she's got to explode and jump like she's coming out of blocks. But I mean, it does help that we have a freaking track guru in the building, because I mean he said it too, like just her strength level from last year to this year, she's able to actually hold a better position in her block now, to where like she could get up, hold that position. Brandon can make his adjustments because she was strong enough to just sit there. And then, and then once she's able to like hit the gas, she can actually like move now. Doesn't look like I don't even know, a sloth trying to run down a track.
Now, guys, if you have any questions on what we talked about today in regards to the linear and the wave formatting, let us know. Or if you even want to dive even more into that, we could pick or choose one of those two topics and go into those even more. But we hope you guys enjoyed today. We will see you guys next time.